Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics, a podcast dedicated to exploring how things get places and the people who get them there. We'll talk with logistics and supply chain leaders about innovation, industry trends, and the future of the logistics business. Now, here's your host, Joe Lynch.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is tracking medical shipments with my friend Alex Guillen. How's it going, Alex?
Very good. Thank you very much, Joe. Appreciate it.
I am so excited to do this topic, and you all should be, who are listening, should be excited too, because we've all known during COVID how critical the medical supply chain is. We also know that we had disruption, and we're going to continue to have disruption as we change our supply chains because of what's happening in the world and what's happening in China, what's happening in Europe. We're going to have new supply chains, and I think we all recognize if that medical shipment is for your loved ones, you want it to be there. So stay tuned. Anyway, Alex, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. My name is Alex Guillen. I work as sales director for Life Science and Pharma for Tive Incorporated. I am based in Switzerland. I've been living here for a while right now, since 1990. And I've been basically in the world of cold chain for the last 16 years. I come from the industry, from pharma. I work with Novartis Vaccines as director for commercial operations in the public markets. And
So where are you at in Switzerland?
I live in the southern part of Switzerland, who people that know Switzerland, that's in the Italian-speaking part, not far from Italy, close to the Lake Maggiore, so it's not such a bad place.
Sounds like such a beautiful place. That's where George Clooney lives sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, he's on the other lake, right next lake, which is the Como Lake on the Italian side. Yeah.
Ah, very nice, very nice. So, can you speak Italian?
Yeah, I've been here long enough. Yeah.
Very nice. Now, Alex, you that is not a Swiss accent you have. So where are you from?
So I'm originally from Peru. So I left Peru when I was 17 years old and went to the US, actually. So that's where I'm from.
Where'd you study? Where'd you study for school?
So I went to the English school. After that, came to Switzerland, then back again in the U.S. And actually, I went to Santa Monica College. Had my part of the West Coast, and then I graduated from George Washington University in Washington D.C. in business.
Where was George Washington? I don't even know.
George Washington University. That's in Washington D.C.
Oh
That's
man,
where
so you were West Coast of the U.S., then the East Coast of the U.S. and Europe.
Yep.
And South America. My goodness. So you can speak a few languages then. How many?
Yeah. 4 fluently.
Well, I am trying to get fluent in English, but that's as far as I'm going to go. They tried to make us speak French back in the day, and now in retrospect, I was like, why weren't we learning Spanish? I live in the U.S. Why weren't we learning Spanish? But anyway, so you work for Tive, Tive. So please tell us, what does Tive do?
So Tive is a company specialized in real-time visibility. It's a company that was founded in 2015 by its founder, owner, and present CEO, Krenar Komoni. And the company started developing solutions for tracking or getting visibility in real time of shipments. And the company is growing very, very fast. It used to be, a handful of people over a year ago, and now it's almost reaching 200. So based in Boston, and but now with global presence today.
Yep. And so when you say real-time visibility, I joke about this, but it's no joke. I had 50 people in a row come on my podcast and say, Joe, I want to talk about visibility. And I was like, man, we can't all talk about visibility all day, every day. There's got to be something else. But your visibility is, I will call it next level visibility. So please explain why that is.
Sure. So we say visibility instead of tracking. Tracking, when you say about tracking, it's basically know where a product is or where an asset is. And that can be inside a warehouse, that can be in transportation. Wearing what it is one side, or basically knowing what it was, so tracking, but actually it was in the past. Those are already two different areas. In terms of visibility, it's just not where it is, but what is the condition. So I have the visibility on where the product is, but what the condition of that product is today. And that is being done by real-time visibility in terms of the condition of the product. So that could be temperature, whether it had a shock, whether it was damaged. So that adds, you can always add information to that visibility to make sense of it.
Right. And when I think of what I think is cool about Tive, and you, please elaborate on this, is when somebody says visibility, they might mean I downloaded an app on the driver's phone, and now the driver, wherever he's at, I can track him. Problem is, I don't know that he got in that truck. He might have gotten in a car and driven to his girlfriend's house. Drivers are pretty responsible, but that could happen. Also, his it could another way we say we could connect the driver to via ELD. Not every driver likes that, but I know we're doing that more and more. But that doesn't track it necessarily on the ocean. It doesn't track it in the air. And also, I don't know that driver, that tractor is attached to the trailer that my stuff is in. Going one step further, I don't know that my pallet ever got loaded to that trailer. So when somebody says I'm tracking that truck for you, that's great. And it's, we're going to get into it, but this, when you're talking medical shipments, this is life-saving drugs potentially. It could be an organ transplant. This is something that we need critically, not just late potato chips to the grocery store. I can't take a chance that there's something missing. And also, how's it doing? It's one thing to know, hey, my cryogenic shipment is in that tractor or trailer. It's a whole other thing to know that it's not warm, right?
Yeah, correct. So, yeah, so the big difference, I mean, I think technology is a big step. If you look at devices that were tracking, like you mentioned, trucks in the past, they used to look about this big, right? So now technologies, militarization have done that technology, so it's smaller. So a Tive device is pretty much the size of a deck of cards. It's quite small. And then in that has what that makes is that this tracker, this device, is you can actually attach it, not necessarily to the truck. You can do that, but it can actually go on the pallet, it can go on the parcel, it can go on close to the product. And so this means that because when you have a combination of cost and as well technology, you're actually able to track the product. You know the condition of the product. The device is close to the product itself. So it's not about the truck, it's not about the driver, it's about the product.
Yeah, and I can say this. I remember studying. I did a lot of training for a lot of different companies on the Food Safety Modernization Act, and the Food Safety Modernization Act wasn't asking us to track the trailer ship temperature. They were asking what is the temperature of the food, and there's a difference there because you can say, hey, that I moved it in that trailer. Well, I don't know. How long did it sit on a dock? How long was it sitting unrefrigerated, right? So this is, you said it's about the size of a deck of cards. I can actually put that into my onto my pallet, put it onto my product, and track.
Correct. And when you mention whether it's food, what is medicine, it is very highly regulated, and therefore also the protection of whatever it is, whether it's product or whether it's medicine, the protection is also, the regulation forces companies to develop the SOPs that really make sure that you're actually looking at the condition of the product. So where you put the tracker, how is it handled, what kind of package you're using, where are you using it, where are you placing it, all that is very highly regulated. So it is important, for service providers in this area to know those regulations, because there is a lot of help already there in terms of how to do the things right, so that connectivity is correct and also the visibility of the condition of the product is good.
Excellent. So yeah, again, I think it's one thing we all want tracking, and there's a price for tracking, right? It's getting cheaper and cheaper. But I think when we're talking the critical, and we'll get into the types of medical shipments that we're talking about, but I think when we get into medical stuff, the bar is higher. there are lives at risk. And again, we just lived through the pandemic, and I always say, knock on wood, that it's over. I had COVID a month ago, so I'm and one of my best friends has it this week. So even though we're on I like to think the tail end of this, we've seen what this can do. And we've seen the difference between having the drugs on hand when we needed them versus not. And not only that, ventilators here in the States, we didn't have enough ventilators. And who would have ever guessed that? So anyway, so let's get into the type of medical shipment. So you told me before we hit record that there's commercial pharma and clinical pharma. Please explain the difference between those two types of medical shipments.
Yep. This is just a way to simplify for the public and make it, let's say, kind of give some level of understanding on the logistics side. So commercial pharma, commercial logistics is when you are actually handling a product that has already received approval of commercialization. It can be commercialized. So it has an FDA approval, and now it can be sold to the public, and that's what is commercial. That what happens in the logistics in this thing, because of there is data, there is stability data of this product already there. It can happen in a week, but it can have product can be shipped in a week, but it can also go months. And today there is even a trend to try more and more ocean shipments, and to reduce cost, but also to which have a better impact and sustainability of the shipment. So this is commercial. Is you imagine production into depots, regional areas, and then somewhere of medicine going to the patient. Clinical world is the difference. The clinical world is just before commercialization, so that's within the clinical trial. And the distribution on clinical happens much smaller. I had the chance to work almost 5 years as a global cold chain director for Fisher Clinical Services, which is part of Thermo Fisher, one of the major players in clinical trials. And what was surprising for me when I worked with them is to see how the world of commercial logistics has a certain period of time, but in clinical, everything happened in 24 hours, 48 hours, because drugs has to be shipped by air quickly, and they have to arrive there. And so the time is much shorter. There is much less information in terms of stability data of the drug, and therefore everything has to host very fast. And then the consequence of cost is higher, because when you are actually doing a clinical trial, you're recruiting patients, you're shipping the drug. It has to be there when patients are there, because in case it's not there, you have to send the patients out and then probably have to get them back if you can get them back. And that's a complexity. It's like commercial can go from point A to B, C, D. Clinical goes from one place to 100, and then as phase 1 and 2, 3, 4 goes one shipment. First, phase 1 is to understand the collateral effects of the drug. Phase 2 about more of its efficacy, and phase 3 you can have thousands and thousands of clinical sites. So it's a lot of complexity on the logistics.
Yeah, and I've got to think, we know we've all heard how expensive it is to develop drugs, so or treatments, we'll say, and I have to think that when it's still in the prototype, and that's probably not the right word, but I'll use it. I'm an automotive guy. We have prototypes.
Study phase.
Study phase. Okay. When those have to cost millions of dollars easily. I mean, you spend all that money, and so if you say, "Hey, Alex, I just got that. It's just going to be a day late to the trial." You go, "Day late? Don't send it because we can't use it." Right? It could be that critical depending on the drugs, right?
Yeah, especially timing. If it's day late, patients are not going to wait in the hospital. They're going to sleep in the hospital, and most of these, especially what are drugs that are more sensitive, like biologics, which needs to keep after a special temperature. There is also a space issue. You need to you move these clinical supplies into a hospital, and in a hospital you have amount of space that you can keep it at 2 to 8 Celsius or 15 25, and that is a whole logistics thing. You're going to just keep on shipping product. People have to handle that, put it under a special environment, make sure that the cold chain is maintained, and make sure that happens when patients are there to do the trials. So it's also a lot of coordination.
Let's talk of so you've explained the commercial versus clinical, and the commercial is that it's already been approved. Now this is being distributed out to all of us consumers for use, and then clinical is you call it study phase. So it could be very expensive and very time sensitive. All of it's time sensitive. All of it's probably a lot of it's the very nature of drugs is it's sensitive. But I think they have probably very different concerns. So if I'm talking commercial pharma, especially we know the drug problem that much of the world suffers from, especially here in the U.S. Theft. I got to think these are worth millions of dollars. So someone says, "Hey, I can steal a trailer full of drugs. I'm going to retire after that." So those have to be tracked in a way that is just it has to be the next level of tracking. So talk about the difference between tracking commercial and clinical shipments using what your experience at Tive.
So in case of commercial, the roads are a bit more established, let's put it that way. The big challenges in commercial, also when we do trucking, is different parts of the world. You are shipping product into, I don't want to mention regions, but some regions are easier than others. And when you go to difficult regions, then you have to raise the level of control and monitoring. In those cases, in commercial, Tive developed has a 24/7 monitoring service, a managed services. So it's not just a tracker. The tracker allows you to know what product is. It allows you to know what it is. Then you have a platform which allows you to manage that shipment, to get intelligent notifications, intelligent alarm if something goes wrong. But then it goes into also having people that are actually to support and be more proactive in case that you might lose the product. And all that let's say all the monitoring services are easier to implement in kind of commercial kind of logistics.
And I would think that I've heard this. A friend of mine called, and he was, I think he's from India originally, but he lived in the U.S. for a long time, and he was doing some business in India. And he called me about cold chain. He says there's tons of cold chain warehouses in India. But it's a big country, and he said there was a lack of cold chain. This is probably 10 years ago, so it's probably changed, but lack of cold chain transportation in some regions. And obviously critically important. I can't put my drugs at risk by saying, "Oh, I'll just move them dry van," if they need to be cold chain. And so you can tell me not only where they're at, but what the temperature is. And I think this is why we're all going to be using these type of trackers because, again, it just makes so much sense. The idea that I have, it could be thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars worth of drugs, and the price is small when you consider if it doesn't get there and somebody has adverse health effects because of it.
Yep, yep. Yeah, and traditionally the way of monitoring temperature has been done in a passive way. So
Oh,
companies use,
it's after the
you
fact.
know, yeah, it's exactly a fire. You're using data loggers. It has its way. I mean, I'm not saying nothing wrong with it, but this product arrive and you actually, find out whether it's through a USB or a cloud, whatever, what happened to the shipment. I think what real-time visibility and action allows is to, while the product's in transit, you can do something and therefore save product. They reduce the waste.
You could there's an alarm on that that says, hey, if this goes over, I'll just make this number up, this goes over 42 degrees, you're going to get an alert to the driver, an alert back to the shipper, alerts to whoever, right? And do those alerts come by your mobile phone or by your systems or what?
Yeah, there are different ways. So first of all, Tive is very API integrative. So actually, it can be the information can be pushed into our customers or a 3PL that we work with. But we also have direct notifications via text or via email, and that's the important thing. But also, what is important is combine alerts, because if you just have temperature, you might have an alert, but as you're supposed to have an alert because the box is open at the right spot. So it's okay to have an alert. So the important thing in case of having devices of real-time visibility is smart enough that is combining shock, motion, geolocalization, and temperature and light, that the alert makes sense and it should happen or it shouldn't happen. So it is also a combination of sensors and a combination of information that allows people to, the logistics provider to take the right decision, understand when is really a problem and when it's not.
Yeah, and by the way, I had some shipments and we were moving. I was advising somebody, and we were moving these from way down in Mexico all the way to the Northeast. So this was a long ride, and some stuff was showing up damaged, and it had been handled at the border, the Mexico-U.S. border, and then through LTL it was handled, and then when it was damaged, it was always kind of like, well, yeah, it was damaged when we got it, right? So it's he said, she said. No, I didn't break it. Alex broke it. It was broken when Alex gave it to me. We didn't handle it that way. And you guys can tell me if we were to use a sensor, and I know we're talking about medical now, but you could tell somebody, hey, your drugs fell from had some sort of shock. They fell off a shelf in this warehouse. And I can tell you the time, and I can give you an alert and say, hey, your stuff was damaged right now. That was a significant enough fall that we suspect there's broken whatever's in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the advantage of having, for example, shock sensors. We can actually, configure the sensitivity of the sensors, to have, depending on the amount of G that you want, the force that you want to apply, and that really allows to customers to understand, because you combine, that it, because of the GPS, because of geolocalization, it happened right here on this place at this time.
That's amazing. So potentially, I could say, hey, those drugs fell off a shelf or were dropped or whatever in this location right now. We suspect there's damage. Let's resend another. Maybe it's a pallet or whatever right now to replace that because it's critical.
Right. And what we have seen is, I mean, this is based on experience, and that's why I think that I got excited to be able to actually see that information in real time. Is that when you start adding data, when you start accumulating information, there is always a pattern. So you start finding out that, oh, my issues are at this place, they are at this site.
This is where the
There's
temperature
this
starts to go
driver.
too high,
That's
or where the drops happen.
Exactly. And then once you get that data, it starts getting smarter. Say, oh, now you start understanding how to do corrective actions. You can improve your process because you know that, I don't know, the Japanese site is making this mistake, or because that courier is not handling properly in that particular part. So, and that's where you can take action, and that's a win-win for everybody. I mean, sometimes service providers like 3PLs, they think they try to do their best, but they also, contract other companies, and then it helps them to also check what they're doing.
And this is the Internet of Things that you keep hearing about. This is it. I call this the Internet of Trucking. I know that's not all just trucking, but I always call IoT Internet of Trucking. But this is well beyond trucking. With, you know what? It's the Internet of Tive. That's what it is. That's
nice
when somebody says, "What is IoT?" Internet of Tive, because this can give me that information that allows me to make better decisions for my supply chain, not just the one time, but go, hey, you know what? We've seen this happen 3 times in the same location, to your point. Let's make a change. Let's get the best practices installed there. Let's get a new operator training. Something has to happen there because we can't keep having the same problems. And you mentioned reactive versus proactive, I think earlier. I tell the story, and it was a food company. And again, I know we're talking about medical, but I know there's some similarities. And they told the story of a food company, but they own some trucks, so they did their own deliveries. They're supposed to deliver like on a Friday afternoon. They couldn't. So they said, just take it back to our terminal, make sure the truck stays on so it stays cold. So Sunday night, somebody comes in and says, hey, this didn't stay cold. Somebody didn't keep this. Well, the operators decided, you know what? I'm not going to tell the boss that I unfroze a whole bunch of the frozen food. Just plug it in. And who's to know? No one knew then. Because, Alex, if it was me and you were in that warehouse, you say, Alex, I'm not going to tell the boss. You tell the boss that we have to throw out $80,000 worth of frozen pizza. No, I'm not gonna. I'm gonna get fired. Screw it. I'm just gonna plug it in, and maybe nobody gets hurt. But we can't take that chance with drugs. I don't want to take that chance with food either. So what we could have had, if I was using a Tive tracker for that, it could be in there, and I could have gotten the warning: temperatures going up. If it continues in this trend in the next hour, we're gonna be in real trouble. And so somebody gets a phone call: hey, Alex, did you make sure that you kept that truck on? Oh no, hell no! I'll drive back over there right now and plug it in. Catastrophe averted. That's what we need. We need to be told before it's over.
And this is also that's one of the advantage of IoT. You mentioned the IoT.
The
There are
Internet of
devices out
Tive.
there. The Internet of Life, yes. There's devices out there that sends data into the cloud. That's one direction. And on Tive, actually, it's real IoT. I don't only send data on the cloud. I can send data into the truck. So even when the product is on transit, I can change the configuration. I can activate the GPS, for example. What maybe it was not activated when it left. I can see this arriving to a sensor area and act and you know increase the frequency of the recordings because it's going into a special area. So there is an interaction that even if it's in transit, even if the product is gone somewhere, in Taipei, you can still go and say, oh, I need to add some more, activate some sensors or doing something. And then you do that at distance. It's like just setting up your oven before you arrive home, I say, oh, I better set it up and start warming up. So when I arrive, I can put my it's already warm. So this is a big differentiator actually, because the technology behind this is not the same that just sending that into the cloud.
And the crazy thing about all this is it's just begun. So we know you guys are collecting a lot of information, helping people be proactive about solving these problems, but it's just begun, because as you have more data points, as there's more things to scan, you'll be able to scan those. And again, 10, 15 years ago, we couldn't track a lot of things, and a lot of things lost temperature control. And by the way, I was talking to Jim Waters, also from Tive, and he said that what you guys have learned over the last year in food is, you ever go buy blueberries and they go bad too quickly, and you go, God, I just bought these 2 days ago. Why are they going bad? And he said, because they heated up somewhere along the line. And so not if something loses temperature control just for a day or so, or hours, it can be all the difference, and it could lose days of freshness. And when you have to start throwing food out, especially when there's people in almost every community who's not getting enough to eat, it makes you wonder, what can we do to fix that? And again, this is why we need this real-time temperature control. Anyway, so I want to make sure we hit on all of these before I let you out of my sight here. So we talked about commercial, we talked about clinical, the differences, and we started to talk about cold chain. So talk a little bit more about cold chain and what you guys are doing for your cold chain medical shipments.
Yeah. So there is on cold chain there's a lot of ranges. Okay. The more typical ranges are the 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, as well as the 15 to 25. It's clean product within those two ranges.
Wait, say that again.
2 to 8 Celsius,
2 to 8
or
Celsius.
15 to 25 Celsius. So those are the two ranges that are, let's say, has been the most popular.
What are those in Fahrenheit for us?
Forget it. I'm not good. Multiply by 3 and put a little bit lower than that, and that's it. I don't want to say a number that's going, why did you say that? And there is just some, probably for the public in general, most of the people that will be hearing this will know, but there is no Fahrenheit in pharma. It doesn't exist.
Well, I'm from
Exist.
automotive, but we never had. When I started in automotive, we had inches, and then they my first year, which is back in the 80s. No more inches. Don't ever say it again. I was like, oh God. So we all got used to millimeters.
That's it's just the
From what I
danger is to go
understand,
and say numbers is too good.
From what I understand, some of the other rest of the world's using this other metric system. I don't understand. Anyway,
So yeah, just to elaborate on that. So those are the most popular, but in the last 15 years, 20 years, there has been a huge development on more personalized medicine, um, and it's called advanced medicine, like cell therapy and all that. And a lot of that medicine comes at very low temperatures. They are moved in -20 Celsius, -60 Celsius, -70 Celsius, like it was the case with the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. And the lower temperatures have bigger challenges in order to, for transportation. And that's a tough one. And then of course it goes down to cryogenic temperatures, which is -194. So these ranges are, the different, let's say, regulators are trying to keep ranges that are easy to manage. And so cold chain management becomes more and more of a challenge. First of all, it's more difficult. The earth is warmer, so you need to. It's like moving product at 28 degrees in Europe was the norm here. Now we're moving product at 38 degrees, so it's just very difficult in the summer. So that's the big challenge right now, and it's becoming bigger and bigger. You mentioned infrastructure as well. COVID has because of COVID, a lot of infrastructure was built around the world because they needed it. That's good. That's a plus, let's say, but it's not enough. So it's infrastructure and it's logistics, and cold chain management requires a lot of investment for this.
yep. So, so you guys can, you right now are managing again commercial, clinical, cold chain. You started to say cryogenics. What is cryogenics for those of us who are not doctors?
Yeah. Now, cryogenics are shipments that are done at -194 degrees Celsius. They usually apply to specialized therapies like cell therapy. Those are what we call LN2s. They are really liquid nitrogen packaging systems in where product is maintained at ultra low temperatures. They touch the movement of cells or to movement of biologics that need to keep a very, very low temperature. This is a big challenge in terms of supply chain, but that's the future of medicine. Cell gene therapy is the future of medicine. And if I can just say, think very, very simplified, cell gene therapy is, imagine somebody going to a human being, taking a cell or sample out of his body, taking that into a laboratory, modifying that, doing something in the laboratory with that, and putting it back to a patient. And it could be to one patient or it could be to multiple patients, depending on what type of therapy it is. The important thing about this type of therapy is that it's very new, it's very, very effective, but it's very expensive because it's in the early developments. And the supply chain has big challenges because when we are actually moving that product back into the patient, they are moved in liquid nitrogen. And these are very ultra low temperatures, which require difficult. It's difficult to manage.
I would also think that if I'm a doctor or a medical team, um, I'm trying to take all the risk out of whatever procedure I'm involved in. So I'm making sure that if you ever have a broken leg, they write on your leg left, or they put an X on your leg, so make sure they don't operate on the wrong leg. And they do everything they can. They shave your leg, they sanitize it. And here in the U.S., we have lots of lawsuits. So if God forbid, somebody does something wrong to, um, in a procedure, a medical team, they're going to get sued. So the idea that you don't spend a little extra to track and be able to guarantee that that stuff stayed the proper temperature and it wasn't tampered with, and it was safely handled from beginning to end, it's worth it. It's just completely worth it because why take the risk? I mean, if it's one of your loved ones, you're just like, I want no risk. I don't want the risk of, oh, well, it seemed like maybe that those cells were heated up a little too much. Maybe they sat on the dock for too long. Nobody wants any of that. So, and by the way, we haven't talked about it. What does a tracker from Tive cost?
Yeah, we have different let's say models in terms of trying, but what our goal, I don't like too much talking about price because it depends so much about volumes and all that, but we are trying as much as possible that per shipment, the customer gets, they can really have full protection of something, not under
Yeah.
$50, per shipment.
So if
And
there's
this is
so if
and
you
this
got a lot of
and this
volume,
is
it's
psychological.
less. Yeah.
Exactly. But just keep in mind that this is just the minimum. Then some customers require having monitoring services, in which they want actually really active people following the shipment, that could go to hundreds or even more. But our goal is that everybody has access to tracking. Tive's goal is that everybody. So I'm giving you a general number. Maybe biotech pharma requires a bit more because they require more in terms of certifications and all that. Maybe the perishables world requires a bit less, but we want that the Tive trackers and the Tive solutions is available to whether it's cell gene therapy as well as people moving cherries, within the California. So it should get everywhere.
And by the way, when you talk about anything that we're talking about here in medical, the price is really secondary to. I mean, everyone has a budget, but when you're talking about cryogenics, and I say I'm moving these genes, or if it's a clinical shipment, and I need to make sure that the timing is right and that the temperature stayed true. The idea you go, oh yeah, boss, I didn't want to spend extra money on on that sensor. How much extra was it? Oh, I don't know, 40, $50. Oh, good job. Good decision. Right? I mean, that we're going to get to a place where that's going to be, and I think we're already seeing this. We know we're going to get to a place where this is going to be mandatory because if Fed regs don't ask for it, medical communities are going to ask for it.
Yeah, I think COVID demonstrated. I don't want to throw the number, but the number was huge. I mean, people can Google it. But the amount of during COVID-19, the amount of vaccines that were thrown away is huge. I mean, I just know 30 million. I think was in France. So, so
My
that's a big number. So it's a lot of
I
money.
have two daughters, and one of my daughters works in procurement at one of the vaccine companies, and very challenging, very challenging. So anyway, we talked about commercial, which is after it's been approved, and the challenge there is potentially not only the temperature control, but we also have security for some drugs, right? Then we talked about clinical, which is where it's the study phase, the prototypes that have to be enormously expensive. So obviously, Tive makes sense there. Cold chain, we just talked about. Cryogenics. Cryogenics just seems like that's a slam dunk. I would have it on every single one. Um, that's what I want to talk to you about is organ transplants. So I think we know that there are organ transplants happening. How does Tive work themselves into that field?
Yep. Yeah, we have a number of customers right now. This is an interesting area because it's delicate because some globally is very different. Some countries have, let's say, the availability, and some countries really lack a lot of the availability. And therefore, and one of the things, especially those countries that really availability is very, very little, that, then having the possibility, and so when finally a patient finds that organ that he needs, when finally he's got it, maybe waiting for 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, or maybe has a few days to live, and then it happens, and then tracking, traceability, real-time visibility, logistics becomes vital. I mean, this is really saving somebody's life. So in terms of being a very, very important tool in order to secure that locally, that is a service is huge. The other one is that the technology is going better and better and better in terms of maintenance of the organs. Organs can maintain for very little time, and all the logistics behind. When I was mentioning clinical trials need to happen in, let's say, 24 hours, 48 hours. Maybe it could be extended to 3 days. Organ transplant movement has to be boom now, and therefore their traceability becomes extremely
Yeah,
critical.
being a day late means somebody died.
Yeah, yeah. This is where it becomes critical, and yeah, we're really proud to see that this is an area that We see that we can be more and more of service, and but we need to expand it. We are very known in the United States for this, but we need to be more known in Europe. So that's what we're working.
I spoke to Jim Waters about this on my podcast before, and he mentioned Jim also works at Tive. I think he's head of marketing, and he mentioned that he goes, "You'd be surprised at how many organ transplants are mishandled." And everybody's doing the best they can, but it's not the same as a production process, right? There's everyone's a little different, and so somebody might say this: we took this organ, we got to fly it across the country, and it's at this airport, and it doesn't get loaded to the plane, and you want to know that. I want to know that before that plane is up in the air. I want to know that's loaded, and if it's not, I want to be able to kind of recover it, because again, each one of the things we talked about, some less, some more, potentially is the difference between life and death for a loved one.
Absolutely, absolutely. We always have this word that when I was in Fisher Clinical Services, that a patient is always waiting one way or another, and therefore, if we look at that, this is the medical world. But anyway, I always think even a kid is always waiting for that gift, or somebody's waiting for flowers, or somebody's waiting for something. But in the life science world, maybe somebody's waiting for the hope to extend his life, and therefore, time become critical. Times become very critical in some cases, and that's, I think, good to know that we can assist when this is necessary.
So, Alex, we've talked about, again, commercial, clinical, cold chain, cryogenics, organ transplants. These are all places that Tive is. And by the way, I should also mention that Tive does also have other applications. I know this is an important one. I know you guys, like, if I bought a server and it's got to be shipped from China, that might cost me millions of dollars. I'm going to say, yep, I want a damn tracker on it to make sure that my server doesn't show up in pieces, right? But this is perhaps the most important stuff you guys are doing, because again, it's not just tracking where it's at. Visibility is important. I think we're all saying visibility is kind of the table stakes, so to speak. But you will not only just tell me where it's at, you'll tell me how it's doing. You'll give me some context. Say, yep, your shipment is right here, and by the way, it dropped, and so make sure someone opens it up and make sure it's okay, or it's coming out of temperature control, or it was opened in the wrong location. You can tell me what's going on with my shipment. So, final thoughts on this very important topic, Alex Guillen.
I think that we are evolving. Even Tive is evolving. We have people, always more and more people. One of the beautiful things of the company is that Tive is a really global company. There is as many people in the United States as outside, as in Europe right now, expanding in Asia Pacific, in Latin America. And this is a global world. It's an illusion to think that a global world. If we look at really the globe as just a dot point in the universe, right? So it's all interconnected, whether we like it or not. It's just that we don't realize about it. So I think what Tive is trying to do is getting that supply chain more and more interconnected, allowing. And how are the companies doing this? That this is a message to everybody. One very important thing Tive is very strong is integration. We're integrating our platform with other platforms out there. The more transparency, the more integration there is, the more communication can go around this really one little world, the more possibilities we're going to have to make logistics easier, better, faster, and more effective. And if we think about the effect that can have in future generations, not only in efficacy and efficiency, but also in reducing waste, in sustainability, in making possible to people that today cannot have access to medicine to have it, to food to have it. For me, it's a big mission. It's a big world. It's a lot that we can do, but Tive cannot do it alone. They need to have cooperation. We need to have partners, and I think that partnerships is going to be the key to success, to that mission, that vision that Tive has, in order to make this possible, to have this connectivity global.
So when you mentioned connectivity and integration, And that, in my mind, enables us to have the proper collaboration. And so when somebody finds out now, oh, I got my shipment, I open it up and it's broken, and it's too late. I want to, if it got broken or tampered with 4 days ago along the path, I want to be able to have that conversation then. I want to be able to collaborate and say, hey, Alex, send me a new one because something's happened to that one. I know I won't accept that one. And again, you mentioned there's always a patient waiting. That's a great motto. And again, if we can't collaborate along, there's always going to be disruptions. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be something that goes wrong in the supply chain. If we have that integration, if we have the IoT or Internet of Tive, I can get to the place where I'm having the conversations I need to have right then. And again, you mentioned earlier, I love this idea of if I see the temperature's always going too high in this warehouse, okay, we're going to do some training. We're going to have adjustments. And we don't have that data yet, but the more shipments we have, well, you guys have the data. That's what we need. Anyway, enough of my blather. So before you go, what's new over at Tive?
So we are, oh my God, what's new? I mean, we are pretty much, everything's new. It's been like a roller coaster. I mean, since I joined it. But one thing that is we're putting a lot of weight is in our monitoring services. Monitoring services are important. The team, this is basically monitoring management services, is that really to follow because customers are demanding more and more, not just to see the visibility, not just to know whether it happened, what is happening, but can we do something about it? Can somebody pick up the phone, call the driver, and say, "Hey, you breed proactive, so you avoid that waste." So we're putting a lot of emphasis, a lot of weight in our monitoring services globally with people in the US and people in speaking different languages, so we can manage it. Experts in logistics also in the team. So that's one thing that really is, my opinion, is one of the big, I mean, areas that which the company is going to be putting a lot of investment. The other one is the company acquired not so long ago another company doing a very cool technology, which is basically temperature and tracking with very easy, able to read it through a mobile phone. So having a mobile phone reading by RFID and NFC information, it almost looked like a piece of paper actually. So it's very high technology, and we were trying to combine technology with the Tive trackers in order to make that a bigger system. We're combining technologies. We're expanding cryogenic temperatures, -100, -200 temperatures. That's important technology, difficult calibrations to make in order to cover as much as possible the range in life science, but also in other parts, in other industries. Yeah, it's an exciting moment and excited times, and the company is growing fast, but it's growing. I think it's growing with the right vision in mind.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So, it's interesting. A little story here. Years ago, when my daughter was still in high school, we were shopping groceries, and she looks at these blackberries or blueberries, something like that. And they all have the barcode on them. And she took her phone and she was trying to read it through a camera. I go, "What are you doing?" She goes, "I want to read where these were grown, where these were grown, and when they were picked." I go, "That's barcode's not going to tell you that." And then she goes, "Well, it should." and I said, "You're right. It should, and eventually it will because of technologies like what you just described.
Right.
It'll be able to tell me every step along the way that this product took." And I think when you have a young person in her 20s now who said this, it should give me that, and she was surprised that it didn't. And I was like, as soon as she said, I was like, yeah. And when we're talking about medical shipments, same thing. I should be able to say, before I use this before I use this medicine, I want to be able to track and see, did this get here safely? Did it stay within temperature range?
Absolutely. I will sell just final words here. I was remember think of and this is a message. Everybody knows that you buy fish on the store, you should keep it fresh, otherwise you might get sick. Not everybody knows that if you buy an antibiotic, you should go put it in your refrigerator and it should be kept fresh, because otherwise it's not going to work. they should they should know that, but not, people don't know that. If they buy something biologics, they don't do it. If you put insulin, they know it, but if they put antibiotics, they don't. So they should know. That's cold chain. They should keep it. Otherwise, it's not working. Efficacy goes down, and boom, you're just taking nothing.
This technology, which seems really, I must say, this is high tech now. It's going to be just standard. I mean, anybody who's not using it, I think, puts themselves at risk because, here in the United States, at least, we have lots of lawsuits. And if I'm able to point out, well, why didn't you do this? This other company uses a tracker like Tive. And if you're not using it and you have problems, and again, for a very small price, again, when we're talking about lives at risk here. So this is, if the feds don't make it standard, the medical community is going to make it standard.
If I can tell you good news, is that I am very hopeful as well, because I have seen a big reaction of the industry. They do realize that technology allows them to be more effective on their shipments. They see it. I would lie to tell you that they don't see it. They see it, and that's why I feel very good, because they see it, and that comes from responsibility as well. In the end, I'd love to see when companies are responsible, and they take action. And they say, okay, yes, it costs me a bit more, but the benefits for my people, for my employees, for my patients is huge. And we see that. And that's a good thing in all levels, not only in pharma biotech, but in food everywhere. They realize this is worth it. So it's a good point.
Yep. Well, I can tell you this. When I ran a little 3PL, I was the general manager, COO, that I would have used Tive for some very specific problem shipments where we had consistent damage. And when you have consistent damage and they're coming back to you and saying, we want a claim for this one. And you're like, how is this our problem that your packaging is not right? We've told you to fix it. Or how is this a problem when that's being handled roughly by your plant? And so I can see there's so many applications, but I do appreciate you taking us through the medical shipments. Anyway, what I'll do, well, first off, Alex, thank you so much. But secondly, what I'll do is I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile. I'll put a link to Tive, and any links that your marketing team gives me, I'll put those in the show notes. And Alex, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. We've been trying to do this for probably a month and a half, and I'm so happy to finally get you on my podcast.
Sorry about that.
No, I know you're a busy man. You're saving lives. So the internet of Tive has kept you busy.
Thank you very much, Joe. It was really a pleasure. And if anybody wants more information, of course, they know how to reach me on LinkedIn, and I'm there always to answer questions to anyone.
Alex Guillen, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward.
You've been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage in conversation with experts in the logistics field. For more details, visit thelogisticsoflogistics.com or follow Joe Lynch on LinkedIn.